Welcome to our self-healing class at First Church, First Center. Tonight's lesson is entitled What I Believe, and it comes from our Louise Hay material. This was based on one of her seminars. And let me start with it. First of all, I want to welcome everybody who's on Zoom today and all of you who are watching us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Thank you for all your comments, your donations. We appreciate all of you who are watching us everywhere. So this evening, again, if you're new, welcome to our self-healing group. This is based upon the book You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. Louise Hay is very important to me. She's important to this center. She got her education from this center, and she's the reason most of you found us. So it's important to realize that Louise was a student of the science of mind, and we also teach from that book as well, and the book You Can Heal Your Life. Louise started out many of her lessons by saying, life is very simple. What we give out comes back to us. You've all heard of words and phrases like karma, the law of cause and effect. We have others. The law of correspondence. But it's the same law, the same principle that's in operation. So going back to that initial statement from Louise, what we give out comes back to us. Let's pause for a moment tonight and really make sure we take that in. If we are habitually bitter, or angry, or we're habitually selfish or arrogant, it's a pattern, right? If we're habitually jealous, or we find ourselves always having resentments and judgments, if we're showing up day by day, if we're showing up in our life with these kind of characteristics, the universe, according to Louise, reflects these very things back to you in your own life. When she says what you give out comes back to you. So just think about that. If we're habitually, again, bitter, angry, jealous, resentful, or any of these more negative states of being or consciousness, they have to come back to us. And there's absolutely nothing personal about it. You know, I've all my life listened to people, counseled people who say, why is God doing that to me? You know, why is God doing that to my family? Why is this happening to me? And here's the thing, you know, it's a sensitive question because, you know, people are going through pain, and we're all sensitive to people when people are hurting. But there's absolutely nothing personal about what's happening. This is the way it works. This is the way the law of attraction works. It's the way of the, you know, also the law of mind. It's the way it works. So let's go into it a little bit more. I know many of you are new, and some of this might be surprising, if not shocking. Some of you won't like it. But, you know, we're trying to give it to you straight. Because once you have an understanding of how it works, then you can do something about it. So we go into it a little bit more. What I believe is the theme for today. If I'm not loving myself enough, okay, and that's everything with Louise. She was saying the bottom line for everybody is they don't love themselves enough. And if I'm not loving myself enough, and I have any of these negative characteristics going on, if I'm envious, for example, or let's say I'm totally indifferent to what's going on with people, I'm so self-absorbed, I don't give a darn, or I don't seem to care. If I'm pessimistic by nature, or if I'm just obstinate and stubborn, or let's say, you know, I'm showing up as being just completely rude, more often than, you know, is good. If any of this stuff is in operation, and going back to the previous group that I mentioned, the anger, you know, if your automatic response to everything is you're angry, or you're just miserable, selfish, you know, you're, you know, suspicious, if any of that's going on, These are patterns that are in operation. And if they're in operation, you're putting that out, it's going to come back to you. What she actually said is the universe acts upon these types of thought patterns. You might recall, I know a good number of you probably watched the movie The Secret, which I think came out around 2007 or 8, if I remember. And in it, there was a big genie representing the universe. And the character only had one thing to say in the whole movie, which was, "Your wish is my command. Your wish is my command." So if you keep dishing it out, right, the negativity or the positivity, the universe is impersonal in the way it responds. It's going to say, "Your wish is my command." So if you understand that that's the way it works, you're going to start to smarten up. You're going to think, because we're either creatively enhancing our lives or we're doing it the other way. And it's not personal. There's no power, no source that's out to get us. Quite the opposite. There's spirit within you that's always trying to get your attention. And as you learn to quiet your own mind, some people call the demons or the committee and all the craziness that all that stuff, that chatter that goes on within. As you learn to take the pause and quiet that down, you're going to discover, the more you're able to do that, that you have power. It isn't just like sitting around and meditating. Once you quiet yourself down and get to that place where you pause and reflect and you have a knowing of what you possess, that you're standing on holy ground, that deep within the center of your being, there is this thing, there is this something that that responds to you all the time because it has to. It doesn't have a choice. The universe responds. There's power, Ernest Holmes said, greater than you, of which you are a part. So Ernest Holmes, who's the founder, the writer of the book, The Science of the Mind, is telling you, you have everything you need right now. Now, you don't act as though you have it, because you forget. And that's a line from, used, associated with Louise Hay and her work, remembering and forgetting. It's the game that we play. When we're connected in our mind and our consciousness with Source, when we're coming from that place of connection, then we know we're in partnership with Spirit. And then the whole world is giving you green lights, because you're opening up the pathway for that to happen. When you're flying solo, which is like you and me against the world kind of thing, and you're operating solely on your intellect, and you're not partnering up with Spirit, you're not bringing spirit into the equation, a remembrance of who you are and what you are, then you're operating out there in the world of ego. Okay, so it's just you're I'm going to say you're doing it alone. So going back to the idea of the secret from the movie The Secret, your wish is its command. Your wish or your knowing is its command. Whatever I know to be true, if I know I'm supplied and supported, if I absolutely know that, if I have that degree of conviction, that's going to open up doors. If I know I'm whole and I'm complete, if I know I'm loving and lovable, and if that's my reality, then life is going to act upon that reality and on that knowing, on that belief, on that conviction. If I'm living my life as a victim, if I'm living my life blaming other people all the time for my life experience, it's going to act on that as well. Only you can answer these questions. If you're living your life as a victim, if you're like doing some version of poor me, and if only this had happened or that had happened, and in your mind you're trying to make other people responsible for where you are. And if you're doing any of that, it's not going to go well for you. And if you're caught up in any form of blame or any kind of resentments, that works against you. It doesn't do a thing to anyone else. Each of us, all of us, are connected to all things. In other words, I'm one with the one life force, and I'm one with you. I'm one with everyone that exists on the planet. And you could say that for yourself too. I'm connected with the allness of life. We understand there's a unitary field that Deepak Chopra talks about. A unitary field, that means there's a oneness. There's one power, There's one presence. And each of us are a part of this power, this presence. When we have that sense of connection, we're coming from connection, we can do anything, right? We can build bridges. When we're in that love, love can build a bridge. You will build bridges, because when you understand that you are connected with everybody, it's very easy to go to that place of connection and truth. And then, all the barriers drop away. But when we get into a place of separation, we start judging people or situations. Bad people, this is bad, that's bad, this isn't good, those people aren't good, I'm not good enough. When any of that type of thought or thinking or languaging comes in, we ourselves are putting us into a place. We become the prodigal child. We're the ones that are out in the weeds. We've forgotten that we're heir to the kingdom. We've forgotten that we're one with the one. When we come into a new thought, when we come into new thought teaching, when we start to learn about our inherent power, that we have this power within us, this divine connection, where we start to realize that you are one with all of life, and you're not just a part of it, but you're one with it. We begin to understand and believe that we're a part of this life-giving energy, this source, this energy, this God that's in all of us, that responds to all of us. When we begin to grasp that we're on the way to self-realization, when we understand I'm one with the one, then we are on the way to realizing what we call self-realization. You think, oh my God, I'm waking up to what I really am, this greater self with a capital S. I am one with the allness of life, with all the power that there is. As we grow in our sense of loving ourselves and awareness of who we really are, we're going to start to drop the need for the negative habits. Because once you become aware that, okay, I'm doing this and this is working against me, it might have helped you out long ago, but it's not helping you out anymore. We come to a place where you'll really truly say to yourself, I'm not a victim of the world I see. I'm not a victim of anything. I'm not a victim of the thoughts that were my parents' thoughts. I'm not a victim of what society says. I'm not trying to fit into what mass thinking is. I'm the author of my own experience. I get to decide for myself what's good and what's wonderful. So, we did many things in the past because that was what was taught to us, but we realize today that we're not victims of anything. We really never were. You may have allowed things to happen when you were at a different time in your life, but that was then and this is now. And today we're in a class where we're talking about self-healing. You and I assume if you're on this call, want to be whole. And the only way Source can do that healing is through us, meaning we need to give up the negatives. Ernest Holmes, in the textbook, when he's talking about affirmative prayer, he speaks of taking the time. He said it's the time, the art, and the method of ridding the negation, which would be all the negativity. So if we want to be whole, we have to put in the effort to deal with the negatives, to face them, to confront them, to neutralize them. If you're letting what, say for example, your partner, your husband, wife, if you're letting what any of these people or your parents said or did or your past mistakes live in your head all the time, rent-free, right? If you're letting that happen, it becomes really hard for you to move forward because you're somewhat stuck. The good news is the universe is never really stuck, but you can be in a place of stagnation for far too long until it is eventually, because life is always moving forward, you'll move from it. So the universe and you is never stuck. If you're feeling uncomfortable, it's for a reason. There's something within you that's really wanting resolution. Each of us are growing and each of us are expanding. Sometimes you might say it's too darn slow, but you are growing and expanding nonetheless. And that's what you're here to do. We're here to grow, to learn to love, to express ourselves. So we want to let our insecurities go. We want to let go of our strong judgments. We want to let go of our blame. If there's anything in you that's pointing a finger at another person, just pull that finger back and stop. It's just, we want to stop the blame game, stop the strong opinions and judgments, stop the talking about other people, especially when we're talking about them negatively. If you're there to praise other people, then you're being a good practitioner. Because a good practitioner in this teaching, a good New Thought student, has seen the good in everybody all the time. We never know what people are going through at any given point in time, nor do we know what they've been through. So the best approach is to have what Louise called the positive approach. Today I was reminded, as I was putting my notes together, of a lesson from the New Testament, and it was in a chapter by Luke. And he was talking about Jesus, who said to his mother, "Didn't you know I must be in my Father's house and doing Spirit's business?" And you hear me talk from time to time is we're here to be about our Father's business. We're here to be about Spirit's business. It's far later than any of us think. I was playing around with artificial intelligence back a month ago, and I was putting my age and statistically, I thought, okay, well, how much time artificial intelligence do I statistically have left on planet Earth? And I thought, my God, it's like 3 or 4 years. So I thought, holy smoke. I don't have the time for the nonsense. The question I ask all of you, of course, realize, it's just a computer. You're going to live another 10 or 15 years. It didn't give me an expiration date, but it did give me an appreciation. It's later than we think. How much time do we spend on stuff that just is not important? I don't know about anybody else, but I haven't got time for the pain, and I don't have time for the drama. I was even listening to Carly Simon's song by the same title. I think went back to 1974. I haven't got time for the pain. So maybe you do. I mean, maybe it's something that gives you pleasure. I hope it isn't, because I want to be about Spirit's business. And Spirit's business is about seeing the good, the God that's in everything and all the time. And just drop the rest. Find the way. You might have a different technique than what I have, but any time where you're caught up in focusing on what other people are saying or doing, especially about you, please, people are going to say all kinds of things. They always have, they always will. What's important, according to Louise Hay, is what you're saying to yourself about yourself. So it's that inner dialogue that we talk about every Thursday that's so important. Is that inner dialogue self-loving? Is it self-giving? Most of the pain we have in our life, is self-created. So we come to realize that we have all this self-created reality. We are working here in this class in particular, week by week, on self-healing. That's what we're always doing here. We keep on reminding you, too, of how great you are, that you are an individualization of God life, that you have power at your disposal. So you don't have to sit around and wait on the Lord to do anything, because once you sit and realize that you are the Lord, you are one with the one, then you're going to realize you have power to use right now. So here we are in our self-healing group again. Let me move on here to the next section. I have a printer that printed out of order. Okay. So we must bring ourselves back from the outer orientation of the world, where there's great confusion, and quiet ourselves, reflect and realize that we are one with the source and allow its guidance. If you're exclusively dealing with the outer world, it's action and reaction. It's too much. I want you for a moment to imagine a life where your every thought, action, and decision is dictated by the desire to seek approval and validation from somebody, Could be your boss, your partner, your mother, your father, anyone. If that's you, you are what we would describe as someone who is other referred. Now, I was one of those people when I was younger. We know here in this teaching that you are a center of spirit. You are a center of God activity. If you're always finding yourself a bit concerned about what people think and say about you, if you find yourself, you're comparing yourself a lot to others, please, please stop doing this. I remember learning in a 12-step program 43 years ago. Never, never, never compare yourself to anybody. If you ever do that, stop, because you're either going to be seeing yourself as superior, inferior, and if you do it either way, it's a mistake. So please stop doing this. You are unique. You are unique in all the history of the world. A masterpiece, no less. There's never been anybody like you, and there never will be anybody like you. I mean, that's how unique you are in terms of the billions of people that have inhabited the earth and will. You're unique. You are a masterpiece. When you haven't learned to love yourself and accept yourself exactly as you are, then your self-worth is a little bit fragile. If it's constantly teetering on the opinions of other people and the judgments of other people, then it just indicates that there's some work to be done. For example, when somebody says something right about you and you're all upset, I mean, that happens to me. People say, "Oh my God, the sermon was so good," or "the lesson was so great." And okay, it's nice to hear. Because you work hours and hours on these lessons and these Sundays and Thursdays. But you know what? There'll be one person who'll send you some text message about something, how awful it was or whatever. And that's the thing you remember. And you wish you didn't remember it, right? So the thing is, we got to come to a place where we realize people have opinions and they say all kinds of things, kind and unkind. And in this teaching, we want to learn to be strong enough in ourselves, right? And not be taken down by what people say. Ralph Waldo Emerson, who I quote all the time, famously said, "To be great is to be misunderstood." So, live your own darn life and live it authentically. You're not looking to your right or left for people to say, "Hey, wonderful, wonderful." So let's dig into that a little bit more. Today we're in the 2020s, as you all know. We have new technologies to deal with. I understand Facebook is competing with Twitter, and now we got something called Threads in the past couple of weeks. So it's one more thing. Our sense of worth these days, for many of you are tied into how many likes, comments, and followers you're getting on Instagram, Facebook, right? And now we got, Threads. And, so that's a whole new generation of people who are looking for approval from other places. Or you might be somebody, man or woman, who's, you're going to wear fancy duds, or you caught up and you must wear your Gucci or your Chanel or Vuitton or all the other types of things. You might get your sense of self-esteem there. Or maybe your sense of self-worth comes from your physical attractiveness. I know a lot of people who are obsessed with what they look like and, their vitality, their muscles, and all of that stuff, or their, physical attractiveness to whatever they're wanting to attract. I'm not going to comment on that other than saying that's where they are. Other people's sense of self-worth might come from the size of their bank accounts, their assets. So people's value or identity and worth might be built upon some of these things. And, the problem with that is if you believe that accumulating more will bring you happiness, if you're in that belief system. The trap is the ego always wants more. You'll find yourself, if that's your way, trapped in a never-ending cycle of chasing external validation. Always striving for the next big thing, the next article of clothing, the next sale, the next whatever acquisition that will finally make you feel better or complete. Yet deep down, there's a sense of emptiness and dissatisfaction that's still lingering. This kind of life is filled with constant fear and anxiety about who is judging you, who's rejecting you, who's approving you. You sacrifice your own authenticity by trying to fit into any of that stuff, because you'll never have as much as the next person. You know, it's just like it's a very competitive game. As I was putting my notes together, I remember in my graduating class in high school, I happened to be the class president. And the only reason I was class president was I was very tuned into what people wanted and expected of me. Now, how many of you are like that? I could size up the situation, I would know what you want me to do, and I could do it, usually. That could be a bit of a gift, and it also can be a bit of a curse. Some of you are really, really good at meeting the needs of other people. The question is, how good are you at meeting your own needs, right? It's sometimes like wearing a mask. Who you are and what you like, what your needs are and interests are somewhat left unknown to the world. In my mind back then, seems like 100 years ago, I'm sure it was some version of, if you really knew me entirely, you wouldn't like me. So why the heck would I show you? You know, I know how to please you. So we learn how to adapt. And in the process, there is a piece of us that's abandoned, at least for a while. While we live in separation, meaning we're not in partnership with Source, we're flying by the seat of our pants, so to speak. Okay, we're not really living authentically. We're not really owning ourselves, who we are and what we are. Ultimately, this ego-driven kind of life leads to a sense of disconnection from our true self and others. I mean, we're born here as spirit, and we're here to thrive and to be authentic. And we don't have to look to the right or the left what people think or say or how they approve of us. We're not here to offend anybody. We're here to evolve, you know, as magnificent spiritual beings. But, you know, we kind of like disassociate ourselves from our real selves early on, many of us, because we're trying to fit in. Look how the teenagers, you know, it's very important for them to fit into a clique and a group, or gang members, or anything else. And you know, and what this teaching really is about is really for you to learn how wonderful you are as soon as you can, and encourage you to express yourself as you really are as soon as you are aware. You know, I'm a spiritual being and I'm here to evolve and grow. An ego-driven life is going to perpetuate constant dissatisfaction and will prevent you from experiencing the deeper, more meaningful aspects of life. And then you find yourself trapped, or having a sense of being trapped. The good news, though, is once you wake up, if you're in a class like this, and we're going to say all these things that are going to encourage you to think for yourself and to love yourself more, the good news is you're free to turn it all around. Starting here and now, you can do that if you really want to. From a 12-step program that I'm very fond of, they used to say, willingness is the key. If you really want the bigger life, the greater life, the universe wants it for you. Because you're here, actually, to grow and expand and evolve. So playing small is not the answer. We can live the life of our dreams. The universe is never holding you back. The point of power is with you, and it's always in the present moment. By learning to turn inward regularly and connecting with your spirit, the spirit within, you will begin a process of transcending the ego, and you're going to start to break free of these limitations. You know, we talk about learning to take the pause. As you stay tuned in with us for reminders week by week, you're going to begin to continue cultivating a life of greater self-awareness. The work we do is, I make it simple and fun as best I can for everybody, but it's really important, and it requires tuning in often, because we have built-in forgetters. You know, and we don't like change generally, but the thing is, life is about change, whether we like it or not. So as you stay tuned in, you keep working with it, working with yourself, you're going to begin to cultivate a life of greater self-awareness. And as you do that, you're going to realize you have power at your disposal. And this power is also going to bring you inner peace and then a genuine connection with others. The question I have, I jotted down for myself, who has time really for the other stuff? I mean, I remember Agatha and some of the people who were in our center. They're always working on themselves. And some of these people are in their 70s or 80s. It doesn't matter. I hope to be working on myself, whatever number of days I, in fact, have left. Who has time for the pain and who has time for the other stuff? And since you know that you have this power within you and it responds to you and you can create a wonderful life, why wouldn't you want to have that? So let's collectively all have the willingness to let go of anything and all things that are getting in the way of us moving forward, stepping up. And it's important for us to reflect on these qualities that we have that are working against us. It's important for us to be aware of our stories. If I'm blaming somebody for my reality and it was 20, 30 years ago, I promise you they're not thinking about me anymore. So I'm punishing myself, right? So I got to find the way to let that go, right? All in any of this, the stories, the negativity, the patterns, they affect how I and we show up in the world to others. And we can turn anything around if we become aware that we're doing it, if we become aware of the thoughts and the patterns. And once we become aware, we do a little bit of this work, then we can create a more positive experience. It was Louise Hay who said, "I believe that all of us are responsible for every experience in our lives, the best and the worst. Every thought we think is creating our future. Every one of us creates our experiences by the thoughts we think and the words we speak. Beliefs are ideas and thoughts that we accept as truth. What we think about ourselves and the world becomes true for us. What we choose to believe can expand and enrich our world. Each day can be an exciting, joyous, hopeful experience, or a sorrowful, limiting, and painful one. Two people living in the same world with the same set of circumstances can experience life so differently. What can transport us from one world to another? She said, I'm convinced it is our beliefs that do so. When are we willing to change she said, when we're willing to change our primary belief system, our structures, then we may experience a true change in our lives. Whatever your beliefs are, any of you, whatever it may be about yourself and the world, remember, they are only thoughts that you have, and thoughts can always be changed. Doesn't matter if you've been doing it for 40, 50, 60 years. All that ended last night. You could be in a new moment today, and the world will turn on a dime for you. Once you become clear and you really believe it and you have a conviction, you watch how it changes. It's more apt to change through practice. As you regularly practice seeing the good in every situation, every encounter being a holy encounter for you. It may not be so for everybody else, but if your practice is seeing the good and the God in every encounter, your world will turn and it will do so quickly. So that's really the way it works for us. I have a little bit more. Some of you may not agree with some of the ideas that I'm sharing from Louise, or some of them are my own, or the ones I'm going to continue with. Because they're unfamiliar, they're new, and they could even be a little bit scary. But don't worry, only those ideas that are right for you will become part of you. Oftentimes people listen to these lessons 2 or 3 times, and they get more and more from it each time they listen. They're on Facebook, rebroadcasting YouTube, by the way. You might think some of the techniques from Louise or from me are too simple, or she said foolish. And you might think they can't possibly work for you, but they work for other people. And she said, I'm only asking you to listen and try them out for yourself. One thing that's great about religious science is we don't have dogma. We're just, telling you, you are one with Source, you're one with God, and you have power, and you can use it. And prove it for yourself, not because we said so. Try them out, as Louise said. Our subconscious mind will accept whatever you choose to believe. The universal power never judges or criticizes us. It only accepts us at our own value. If you accept a limiting belief about yourself, then it will become the truth for you. But the question is, why would you do that? Right? If you believe that you're too short, too fat, too thin, too smart, not smart enough, too rich, too poor, if you believe you're incapable of forming relationships, then those beliefs become true for you. Remember that we're dealing with thoughts. Your thoughts are acted upon, and your thoughts, furthermore, can be changed if you really want them to be. Again, willingness is the key. How much do you want to live a great life? How impassioned are you about living a great, wonderful life? Because passion drives the bus. So, if you can change your thinking, you can change your life. But you need to back it up with some emotion and really know it to be true. It's not enough just to say the affirmation. You really want to get to the point where you believe what you're saying. Next point she said is, remember, we're dealing with thoughts. Sometimes they're thoughts that have been around for many years. And thoughts can always be changed. We have unlimited choices about what we can think. And the point of power is always right here with you. So what are you going to do, is my question. What are you thinking in the present moment? Is it positive or is it negative? Every Thursday I ask, what's it been like being you? Just really want to know, have you been monitoring your thoughts? Have you been self-correcting when you're in the weeds and you're negative? Have you been pulling yourself back in, telling yourself something wonderful about yourself? When we were children, we learned about ourselves and about life from the reactions of the adults around us. Therefore, most of us have ideas about who we are and the rules of life, who we ought to marry, for example, how our life ought to be lived. We learned a lot of stuff when we were kids. If you lived with people who were angry and fighting all the time and guilty and not truthful with one another, then you learned a lot of negative things. And and undoubtedly they're part of you and your world. When we grow up, we have a tendency to recreate the emotional environment of our early home life. We also tend to recreate in our personal relationships something similar to what was going on with our parents. If we were highly criticized as children, then we will seek out those in our adult life who will somewhat duplicate what we experienced as kids. So we want to learn to break those patterns. If you've got one of those patterns going on in your life right now, you gain some awareness about it. You can change anything around once you become aware of how you're participating in it. As a kid, if you were praised and you were loved and you were encouraged, you're probably showing up as a person who's praising people, loving life, and encouraging people. If you were not encouraged, and you were always criticized, then most likely there's aspects of that in you now. And Louise said, I don't say all this for you to get upset with your past or your parents. She commented in this portion of her book that we're all victims of victims, in the sense that people taught you what they knew, and they couldn't teach you anything that they didn't know. And she went on to say, if your mother or father didn't know how to love themselves in a relationship, it would be very hard for them impossible for them actually to teach you how to love yourself. They were coping the best they knew how with the information they had. And she invited us in that section of the work to think about your parents and their relationship. And she said, you could delve into, if they were still living, conversations about what their childhood was like. Another thing Louise Hay said, and sometimes not everyone is in agreement with it, she said, I believe that we chose our own parents, or you may think of it differently. You might think that you were born to the right parents. She thought that our soul had something to do with the selection when we're coming to earth. In other words, we wound up with the right people for the life lessons that we had to learn. We came to life, we talk about perfect place, perfect time all the time, and She's taking that a step further by saying you're born into the right family, the right set of circumstances to learn the lessons that you are here to learn. So she thought we had a lot to do with it, and being drawn to them, to people who would enhance our spiritual journey and work. Next thing she went into is, whatever's going on in your life, wherever you're stuck, wherever you're having a problem, the thing to remember is, at all times, you're bigger than the problem, first of all, and you're always dealing with a thought, and remember always, a thought can be changed. So I hope you take that away always. If you're having one of those moments, those days, or those weeks, say to yourself, it's only a thought, and I can change this thought. No matter what the problem is, you are experiencing the outer effects of your inner thoughts. Even if you're a person who has really low self-esteem or self-hatred, she said that's a thought too. It's a thought that produces very poor feelings, and then you buy into the feeling. She said, however, if you don't have the thought, you won't have the feeling. So our thoughts can be changed if you stay with it, you work on it. Change the thought, and the feeling must go. The past has absolutely no power over us. That's an interesting statement, because Ernest Holmes was saying, please find me one person who's redeemed from the bondage of self. And what he was talking about is people carry around all their grievances like a sack on your back that weighs hundreds of pounds, or a weight on a ship, an anchor. We carry stuff around with us, our hurts. The past has no power over us, and yet we hang on to so much of the past. So imagine you in your prayers and meditations releasing those hurts, the anchor, the stuff that's weighing you down. Imagine yourself releasing any and all of it. It doesn't matter how long we've had this negative pattern, we can be free of it starting today. In any new moment, you're able to do that. Believe it or not, this came from Louise, we do choose our thoughts. We may habitually think the same thought over and over again, so it doesn't seem like we're choosing anything. But we did make the original choice, and so we can get to a point where we can think a different way. How often have you refused to think a positive thought about yourself? See, I know people have got such a negative, I'll call it mantra, about themselves and about their health. They're always talking about what's wrong with their health. And sure, okay, we're getting older, we have different levels of vitality. But, if you're a good practitioner of this teaching, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be talking about the perfect pattern that's operating in you and through you, the health that you have. It's going to be celebratory. If you do it the other way, talking about what's wrong with you, you're digging yourself into a hole. Because you're learning here, your thoughts, your words have power. So let's start thinking positively about ourselves. You can also refuse to think a negative thought. You can absolutely refuse. The innermost belief for everyone, Louise said, that she's ever worked with is that I'm not good enough. And of course, we all know that comes from childhood stuff, right? I'm not good enough. Everyone that I know, she said, or ever have worked with, is suffering from self-hatred or guilt, not feeling good enough to some degree. I'm not good enough. I don't do enough. I don't deserve. And she says, but for whom are you not good enough? Where does that come from? And by whose standards? And she went on to say, I find resentment, criticism, guilt, fear the cause of most problems in our lives. These feelings come from blaming others and not taking responsibility for our own experiences. If we are all responsible for everything in our lives, then there's nobody to blame. I don't have time for it. The question I want to ask you is, do you have time for it? You have important work to do, and that's work with you. One of our expressions for First Church is, we're doing important work, and we don't want to go down. We're in a new moment. This is 2023. We're not trying to deal with the church that was 20 years ago, or even the church that was here before COVID. We have new responsibilities. every one of you in your life have a whole new set of things on your plate. You're in a different place. Please release the need to drag in the stuff that was going on 4 years, 5 years, 6 years ago. Find a way to release the resentments. You don't have time for it. I mean, maybe you do. I mean, I shouldn't tell you what to think. Think what you want to think. But we're trying to tell you, you could see peace instead of anything you're seeing. You could realize that your life is wonderful, that you're an inlet and outlet of God consciousness, and the universe is giving you all green lights to create any kind of life you want. You know, there's nothing ever stopping you, except for you, perhaps. Whatever is happening out there in your life is only a mirror of your own inner thinking. Louise went on to say, listen, I don't condone people's really bad behavior. She says, but it is our belief system that attracts the behavior. You know, if you have some of those people in your life, there is some thought in you that's attracting people who exhibit poor behavior. If you find that people are constantly abusing you or mistreating you, then this is your pattern. It isn't really about them, it's about you. When you change your thoughts that attracts this behavior, it will stop. We can always change our attitude towards the things that have happened to us in the past. And you can even language, in the past, this happened. In the past, in the past, in the past. It's, you know, please stop talking about these things as though they're occurring in the present, or they will be. So we can change our thoughts about the past. She last said how foolish it is for us to punish ourselves in the present moment because somebody hurt us 5, 10 years ago. You know, find the way. Call a practitioner. Call Greg. Call somebody, and we'll talk it out. If we choose to believe that we are helpless victims and that all of life is hopeless, then the universe will support us in that belief. Our worst opinions of ourselves will be confirmed. If we choose to believe that we are responsible for our experiences, the good and the so-called bad, then we have the opportunity to outgrow the effects of the past. We can change and we can at last be free. The road to freedom is through the doorway to forgiveness. We may not know how to forgive people. And I know some of you have been through hell. I've heard about it. I've had my version. You know, and we may not want to forgive people, but if we are willing to forgive, we begin the healing process. So always, as I've learned from every 12-step program, put yourself at the top of that list. You know, forgive yourself, forgive other people. Love holds no grievances. So you want to love yourself, you don't have any grievances. You don't have any grievances towards yourself or anybody else. Forgiving, it's an imperative for our own self-healing so that we can release the past and forgive everyone.